My dad called me lucky to have this job when I asked for a raise after 3 years of running his multi-million-dollar company. Lucky I had increased profits by 40%, expanded into 3 new markets, and worked 80-hour weeks while he golfed with clients. But that dismissive comment was nothing compared to what I discovered in his locked desk drawer that same evening. Inside were documents that would shatter everything I believed about our family, my inheritance, and the empire I thought I was helping to build. Hey everyone. Before we dive into this incredible family betrayal story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready for a wild ride of corporate family drama that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this revenge story gets absolutely insane. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. My name is Serafina, and I never imagined that working for family could become my biggest nightmare. For 3 years, I had poured my heart and soul into Sterling Dynamics, the logistics company my father Richard built from the ground up. What started as a small freight operation had grown into a regional powerhouse under my management, yet I was still earning the same entry-level salary I had started with. That Tuesday morning, when I walked into his mahogany-paneled office, I felt confident about my request. The quarterly reports were spread across my tablet showing consistent growth, improved efficiency ratings, and client satisfaction scores that exceeded industry standards. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation outlining my contributions and market rate compensation data. Dad, I think it's time we discussed my salary. I began settling into the leather chair across from his massive desk. The company has grown significantly, and I believe my compensation should reflect my responsibilities and performance. He barely looked up from his newspaper, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Serafina, you're lucky to have this job. Most people your age would kill for this opportunity. You're getting valuable experience that money can't buy. The word lucky hit me like a slap. Lucky I had sacrificed relationships, weekends, and my mental health to build his company. I had negotiated deals that saved hundreds of thousands, implemented systems that streamlined operations, and personally managed our biggest clients when crisis situations arose. But, Dad, I'm essentially running the entire operation. The profit margins have increased by 40% since I took over daily operations. I think a salary adjustment to reflect market rates is reasonable. His expression hardened, the same cold look he had given me countless times throughout my childhood when I dared to question his authority. You think you're entitled to more money just because you've done your job. This is a family business. Serafina, family doesn't nickel and dime each other. You'll inherit all this someday anyway, so consider your current salary an investment in your future. That evening, I stayed late in the office, stewing over his words. The building was empty except for the night security guard, and I found myself walking past my father's office. The door was slightly ajar, unusual since he always locked it before leaving. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it open. His desk looked the same as always, but something was different. The bottom right drawer, the one he always kept locked, was partially open. I had wondered for years what he kept in there, imagining it contained important contracts or financial documents too sensitive for the main filing system. My hands trembled as I pulled the drawer open completely. Inside were manila folders, each labeled with dates going back 5 years. The first folder I opened contained correspondence with lawyers' documents about something called trust restructuring and beneficiary modifications. As I read through the papers, my blood ran cold. These weren't just administrative documents. They were legal papers showing that my father had been systematically removing me from inheritance documents, transferring assets to offshore accounts, and preparing to sell the company without my knowledge. But the most devastating discovery was a series of emails between my father and his lawyer discussing his exit strategy. Guys, In these emails, he referred to me as temporary management and outlined plans to sell Sterling Dynamics to a competitor within the next 6 months. The sale price was astronomical, nearly $15 million money that I had helped generate through my tireless efforts. One email made my stomach drop completely. Serafina has been useful for improving operations, but she's becoming too demanding about compensation and recognition. Once the sale goes through, we can terminate her employment, and she'll never know how much the company was actually worth. She signed a non-disclosure agreement when she started, so she can't discuss company finances with anyone. Another folder contained bank statements showing payments to shell companies' tax documents with falsified information and contracts with vendors that included kickback arrangements. My father had been embezzling money from the company for years, skimming profits and hiding assets, while I worked to improve the very systems he was exploiting. The final folder was the most personally devastating. It contained a revised will that completely excluded me from any inheritance, stating that I had been adequately compensated through employment, and that his assets would be donated to charity upon his death. The charity, however, was a foundation he controlled, essentially another way for him to maintain control over the money while appearing philanthropic. I photographed every document with my phone, my hands shaking with anger and betrayal. This man had looked me in the eye for 3 years while I worked to build his company, all while planning to steal the fruits of my labor and leave me with nothing. He had manipulated my loyalty, exploited my dedication, and treated me like a disposable employee rather than his daughter. The worst part was realizing how calculating his behavior had been. Every time I had suggested improvements or asked for recognition, he had deflected with talk about family loyalty and future inheritance. He had used my love for him against me, convincing me to work for below-market wages while he planned to profit enormously from my efforts. As I sat in his chair, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, I realized that the man I had idolized my entire life was nothing more than a fraud and a thief. He had stolen not just money, but years of my life, my trust, and my sense of self-worth. The company I had helped build was going to be sold from under me, and I was supposed to be grateful for the privilege of being exploited. But Richard Sterling had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated his daughter. I wasn't going to walk away quietly and let him destroy everything I had worked for. As I carefully returned the documents to their folders and closed the drawer, I began formulating a plan. If my father wanted to play dirty business games, he was about to learn that I had inherited more than just his business acumen. The evidence I now possessed would be the foundation for exposing his crimes, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. One wrong move could result in him destroying evidence or accelerating his timeline. I had to be patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless in my approach to justice. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a completely different perspective. Every interaction with my father would now be calculated, every conversation a potential opportunity to gather more evidence. I had spent the entire night researching corporate fraud laws, inheritance disputes, and whistleblower protections. Knowledge would be my weapon, and patience would be my strategy. "Good morning, Dad," I said cheerfully as I knocked on his office door. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday. You're absolutely right about family loyalty being more important than money." His face relaxed into a satisfied smile, the same condescending expression he had worn when dismissing my raise request. "I'm glad you understand, Serafina. Sometimes we need these conversations to remind us what really matters. Family above all." "Absolutely," I replied, fighting the urge to reveal what I knew. "Actually, I was hoping we could discuss some of the upcoming projects. I have some ideas about expansion that might interest you." For the next 2 weeks, I played the role of the obedient daughter perfectly. I implemented new efficiency measures that increased profits, even further negotiated favorable contracts with suppliers, and maintained excellent relationships with our biggest clients. But behind the scenes, I was building an ironclad case against him. My first breakthrough came when I gained access to the company's accounting software. As the operations manager, I had legitimate reasons to review financial reports, but now I was looking for specific discrepancies that matched the evidence I had photographed. What I found exceeded my worst expectations. Richard had been operating a sophisticated embezzlement scheme for over 5 years. He had created fake vendor accounts, approved inflated invoices, and then received kickbacks through the shell companies I had discovered in his desk. The total amount stolen exceeded $2 million money that should have been reinvested in the company or distributed as employee bonuses. I documented everything meticulously, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet that tracked every fraudulent transaction. Each entry included dates, amounts, fake vendor names, and corresponding bank deposits to his personal accounts. The pattern was undeniable and would be impossible for him to explain away. My second major discovery came through client communications. Several of our biggest customers had been discussing the potential sale of Sterling Dynamics, mentioning conversations with my father about transition planning. These emails revealed that he had been actively marketing the company for months, using my operational improvements as selling points to increase the purchase price. One particularly damning email chain showed him negotiating terms that would require all current employees to be terminated within 90 days of the sale. He was literally selling my job security to maximize his profit planning to leave me and our entire staff unemployed, while he walked away with millions. But I needed more than just evidence. I needed allies who could help me expose his crimes and protect myself from retaliation. My first recruit was Marcus Webb, our head of IT security and my closest friend at the company. Marcus had always been suspicious of Richard's secretive behavior and frequent mysterious meetings with lawyers and accountants. "Marcus, I need to show you something, but I need your absolute discretion," I said, closing his office door behind me. "What I'm about to share could put both of us at risk, but it's about something much bigger than our jobs." I laid out the evidence systematically, watching his expression change from curiosity to shock to anger as he absorbed the scope of my father's betrayal. Marcus had worked at Sterling Dynamics for 8 years, building the computer systems that I had helped optimize. Learning that his job security was being sold away while his efforts increased someone else's profit was devastating. "This is insane, Serafina. How long has this been going on?" he asked, scrolling through the photographs of financial documents on my phone. "At least 5 years, possibly longer. But here's what we're going to do about it," I replied, pulling out a legal pad where I had outlined my strategy. "We're going to document every single crime, secure all the evidence, and then expose everything simultaneously to prevent him from destroying records or fleeing with the money." Marcus immediately agreed to help, providing technical expertise to secure digital evidence and create backup copies of all incriminating files. He also had connections with former employees who might have witnessed suspicious activities or been victims of similar exploitation. Our third ally emerged unexpectedly. Janet Morrison, the company's bookkeeper for 12 years, had been asking increasingly pointed questions about certain transactions she was required to process. She had noticed the same irregularities I had discovered, but had been afraid to voice her concerns directly. "I've been wondering about some of these vendor payments," Janet confided during a private conversation in the break room. "The amounts seem excessive for the services described, and I've never met representatives from several of these companies." When I shared my findings with Janet, she nearly cried with relief. "I thought I was going crazy," she admitted. "I've been losing sleep over these transactions, wondering if I was missing something obvious or if something fraudulent was happening." Janet's insider knowledge of the accounting systems was invaluable. She could trace the money flows with precision and had access to bank reconciliation reports that would prove the funds were being diverted to Richard's personal accounts. More importantly, she had been documenting her concerns in personal notes, creating a timeline that corroborated my evidence. With my core team assembled, we began planning the exposure strategy. The revelation had to be comprehensive and simultaneous, targeting multiple authorities to prevent Richard from manipulating the situation. We would need to contact the IRS about tax fraud, the state attorney general about embezzlement, the Department of Labor about wage theft, and potentially the SEC if his activities affected the planned sale to public companies. But first, we needed to protect ourselves legally. I contacted Sarah Chen, a corporate attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases and family business disputes. Sarah immediately recognized the severity of the situation and began preparing protective documentation that would shield us from retaliation. "Your evidence is extremely compelling," Sarah explained during our confidential consultation. "The combination of embezzlement, inheritance fraud, and planned wrongful termination creates multiple causes of action, but timing will be critical. Once you trigger this process, your father will likely become desperate and potentially dangerous to your case." The moment of truth came 3 weeks after my initial discovery. I had arranged a meeting with the state attorney general's office scheduled for the following Monday. All evidence had been secured, copied, and stored in multiple locations. Our legal protections were in place, and our allies were ready to provide testimony. That Friday evening, I sat in my father's office one final time as his unsuspecting daughter and employee. Tomorrow, I would transform into his greatest adversary. The man who had taught me about business ethics and family loyalty was about to learn that his lessons had taken root more deeply than he ever intended. "Have a good weekend, Dad," I said, maintaining the facade until the very end. "See you Monday morning." He smiled and waved dismissively, completely unaware that by Monday afternoon his world would be completely destroyed by the daughter he had so carelessly betrayed. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I had spent the weekend in final preparation, reviewing every document, confirming every detail, and mentally rehearsing the coordinated attack that would expose my father's crimes. But as I walked into Sterling Dynamics that morning, I realized I needed one more crucial ally before triggering the nuclear option. Patricia Hendricks, our lead client relations manager, had worked directly with my father on the most sensitive accounts. If anyone had witnessed suspicious conversations or unusual client interactions related to the planned sale, it would be her. More importantly, Patricia had always been protective of the company's employees and had expressed concern about recent changes in management direction. "Patricia, do you have a few minutes to discuss something confidential?" I asked, closing her office door and activating the white noise machine she used for sensitive client calls. "Of course, Serafina. You look worried." "What's going on?" I had learned to read people's reactions carefully over the past month, and Patricia's expression shifted from concern to alarm as I explained what I had discovered. Unlike my previous allies who had suspected problems, Patricia was completely blindsided by the scope of my father's betrayal. "I can't believe this," she whispered, staring at the evidence spread across her desk. "Richard has always been demanding, but I never imagined he was stealing from the company and planning to sell without telling anyone. We've all been working so hard to build something we thought would last." But Patricia's real value became apparent when she shared information I hadn't considered. "Serafina, there's something else you need to know. About 3 months ago, your father asked me to prepare detailed client portfolios and relationship histories for strategic planning purposes. He specifically wanted documentation of contract terms, renewal dates, and client satisfaction scores." "That sounds like due diligence preparation for a sale." I realized my anger flaring again. He's been planning this for months, using our work to make the company more attractive to buyers. There's more, Patricia continued, pulling out a locked filing cabinet. He also asked me to identify which employees had the strongest client relationships and which ones were most easily replaceable. I thought it was for performance evaluations, but now I realize he was probably planning the mass termination you mentioned. The documents Patricia retrieved were devastating. My father had been categorizing employees based on their value to potential buyers and their likelihood to discover his fraudulent activities. I was listed in the high-risk category, described as operationally valuable but potentially problematic due to family relationship and increasing demands for recognition. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder and his expression grim. Serafina, we have a problem. I was reviewing the server logs over the weekend, and someone accessed the financial databases from an external connection yesterday evening. The access came from your father's home computer. My blood went cold. Had Richard discovered that his locked drawer had been compromised? Was he already moving to cover his tracks or accelerate his timeline? What files did he access? I asked urgently. Bank reconciliation reports, vendor payment histories, and employee personnel files. But here's the weird part. He also deleted a bunch of emails from his company account, including some of the correspondence with lawyers that you photographed. This changed everything. If my father was destroying evidence, I couldn't wait until Monday afternoon to contact authorities. I needed to act immediately, but I also needed to secure any remaining evidence before it disappeared forever. Patricia, I need you to print every client document related to the sale preparation right now, I instructed. Marcus, can you recover those deleted emails from the backup servers? Already on it, Marcus replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The automatic backup system creates copies every 24 hours, so I should be able to retrieve most of the deleted files. But if he figures out how the backup system works, he could wipe those too. While Marcus worked on data recovery, I called Sarah Chin, my attorney, to explain the escalating situation. She immediately grasped the urgency and began making emergency contacts with law enforcement and regulatory agencies. We need to move today, Sarah confirmed. If he's destroying evidence, it means he either knows about your investigation or has decided to accelerate his plans. Either way, waiting could result in losing crucial proof of his crimes. By noon, our war room was fully operational. Patricia's office had become our headquarters with printed documents sorted into evidence categories, Marcus's laptop displaying recovered emails, and multiple phones connecting us with various authorities. Janet had joined us with additional financial records, and Sarah was coordinating legal strategies via conference call. The first breakthrough came when Marcus successfully recovered the deleted emails. Among them was a recent exchange between Richard and his buyer discussing an expedited sale timeline due to operational concerns and family complications. The buyer was pushing for a closing date within 2 weeks, suggesting that Richard had revealed enough about his situation to create urgency. But the most shocking discovery came from Patricia's client files. Hidden among the due diligence documents was correspondence showing that the buyer was not just another logistics company. They were a subsidiary of Blackstone Freight, our biggest competitor who had been trying to acquire our client base for years. My father wasn't just selling the company, he was essentially handing our entire operation to our primary business rival. This is industrial espionage, Patricia gasped, reading through the documents. He's not just betraying his family and employees. He's destroying everything we've built as a competitive advantage in this industry. The weight of this revelation was staggering. Blackstone Freight had been underbidding us on contracts and mysteriously knowing details about our operational strategies that should have been confidential. Now I realized that my father had probably been sharing insider information for months, using his position to give our competitors advantages while his own employees worked unknowingly against their own interests. Janet discovered another devastating detail while reviewing recent financial transactions. Serafina looked at these consulting payments to something called strategic advisory services. Richard has been paying them $50,000 a month for the past 6 months. A quick internet search revealed that Strategic Advisory Services was a shell company registered to the same address as Richard's personal lawyer. He had been paying himself consulting fees from company funds, essentially stealing an additional $300,000 beyond the embezzlement scheme I had already documented. At 2:30 that afternoon, our coordinated attack began. Sarah simultaneously filed complaints with the State Attorney General's office, the IRS Fraud Division, and the Department of Labor. Each filing included complete evidence packages with financial documentation, recovered emails, and sworn statements from our team of whistleblowers. I personally called our 3 biggest clients to inform them about the planned sale and the potential impact on their contracts. These clients represented over 60% of our revenue, and their reactions would determine whether Richard could still complete his sale, even if he avoided criminal prosecution. Mr. Davidson, this is Serafina Sterling. I began my first call to our largest client. I'm calling to inform you about some critical developments at Sterling Dynamics that could affect your logistics contracts. The conversation was difficult but necessary. Mr. Davidson was shocked to learn about the planned sale, especially since Richard had assured him just weeks earlier that Sterling Dynamics was committed to long-term partnership growth. When I explained the circumstances behind my discovery and the timeline Richard had been concealing, Mr. Davidson's tone shifted from surprise to anger. Serafina, I need to be direct with you. If Sterling Dynamics is being sold to Blackstone Freight, we will immediately terminate our contracts and seek alternative logistics partners. Blackstone has been our competitor in other markets, and there's no way we can trust them with our distribution strategies. Similar conversations with our other major clients yielded the same response. By 4 o'clock, I had documentation showing that over 70% of our client base would terminate their contracts if the sale proceeded. This information would be crucial for law enforcement, but it also meant that Richard's sale was now practically impossible to complete. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus received confirmation that federal authorities were beginning their investigation. Bank records were being subpoenaed, and Richard's accounts were being flagged for suspicious activity monitoring. The wheels of justice were finally turning, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead. My father was about to discover that his carefully planned empire was crumbling around him, and he would undoubtedly try to find ways to retaliate against me personally. But with my allies in place and legal protections secured, I was ready for whatever desperate measures he might attempt. The daughter he had underestimated was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected and devastating blow that nearly destroyed everything we had worked to build. I arrived at the office early, expecting to coordinate with my allies as federal investigators began their work. Instead, I found Marcus waiting in my office with an expression I had never seen before, guilt mixed with fear. "Serafina, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "Something happened last night that changes everything." My stomach dropped immediately. Marcus had been my most trusted ally, the person who had risked his career to help me gather digital evidence against my father. His tone suggested that our alliance was about to crumble in the worst possible way. "Your father called me at home around 10 o'clock last night." Marcus began avoiding eye contact. "He knows about our investigation. He knows about the evidence we gathered, and he knows about the federal complaints." "How is that possible?" I demanded, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "We were so careful about operational security." The only people who knew the full scope were you, Patricia, Janet, and Sarah. Marcus finally looked at me directly, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Serafina, he offered me the head of IT position at his new company after the sale goes through. Full benefits, 50% salary increase, and a signing bonus that would pay off my student loans completely. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had been struggling financially for years, working extra hours and taking freelance projects to make ends meet. My father had identified his vulnerability and exploited it with surgical precision. "So you told him everything?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not everything," Marcus said quickly. "I told him you had discovered some irregularities in the financial records and were asking questions about the planned sale. I said you seemed suspicious, but that I didn't think you had enough evidence to cause real problems." "But that's not true. Is it, Marcus? We have enough evidence to destroy him completely, and now he knows it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I may have also mentioned that you had been accessing his office after hours and that you seemed to have detailed knowledge of his business plans. I didn't tell him about the specific documents or the federal complaints, but I gave him enough information to know that you're a serious threat." The full scope of the betrayal became clear as Marcus continued his confession. He had not only warned my father about the investigation, but had also provided him with enough details to begin damage control. Richard now knew that I had access to incriminating evidence that I had built a team of allies within the company and that federal authorities were likely involved. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice getting smaller. "He asked me to monitor your computer activity and email communications. He wants to know who you've been talking to and what evidence you might still be gathering." I stared at Marcus in disbelief. This was the person I had trusted with the most sensitive aspects of my investigation, the person who had helped me recover deleted emails and secure digital evidence. Now he was offering to spy on me for the man we were trying to expose. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If you're working for him now, why warn me?" "Because I realized what I had done," Marcus replied, finally showing some genuine emotion. "After I hung up the phone, I understood that I had just betrayed someone who trusted me completely. Someone who was fighting for justice, not just for herself, but for all of us. I sold out my principles for money, and I hate myself for it." But the damage was already done. Within hours of Marcus's conversation with my father, Patricia received an urgent call summoning her to Richard's office. She emerged 20 minutes later looking shaken and defeated. "He knows," Patricia said simply when she found me in the break room. "He didn't say how much he knows, but he mentioned that some employees had been spreading rumors about company business and that anyone involved in unauthorized discussions about confidential matters would be terminated immediately." "Did he threaten you directly?" "He offered me a promotion and a transfer to the regional office in Phoenix. Better salary, full relocation assistance, and a guarantee that my position would be secure regardless of any future ownership changes. He made it clear that this offer was contingent on my loyalty and discretion." I watched Patricia wrestle with the decision in real time. Like Marcus, she was facing a situation where her financial security was being weighed against moral principles. The difference was that Patricia had a family to support, including 2 children approaching college age and a husband who had been unemployed for 6 months. "I can't afford to lose this job, Serafina," Patricia said finally. "I want to support you, and I believe everything you've shown me is true, but I can't risk my family's financial stability for a legal battle that might take years to resolve." Janet received a similar offer that afternoon. Early retirement with full pension benefits and a generous severance package. At 62 years old, Janet had been planning to work for at least 3 more years to maximize her retirement savings. The offer my father presented would allow her to retire immediately with financial security she had never expected. By Wednesday morning, my alliance had completely collapsed. Marcus was actively monitoring my communications for my father. Patricia was preparing for her transfer to Phoenix, and Janet was cleaning out her desk to begin early retirement. The people I had trusted most had been systematically bought off or intimidated into abandoning our cause. But Richard's counterstrike went beyond just neutralizing my allies. He began spreading rumors throughout the office that I was having emotional problems related to stress and family pressure. He suggested to other employees that my recent behavior had been erratic and that I was making unfounded accusations against management. Serafina has been under tremendous pressure lately. I overheard him telling our receptionist, "Working in a family business can be challenging, especially when personal and professional relationships become blurred. I'm concerned about her well-being and considering whether she might benefit from some time away to address these issues." The implication was clear. My father was laying the groundwork to have me declared mentally unstable or emotionally unfit for my position. If he could discredit me personally, any evidence I presented could be dismissed as the desperate accusations of a disturbed employee rather than the legitimate complaints of a whistleblower. The psychological pressure was enormous. In the span of 48 hours, I had gone from feeling confident about exposing my father's crimes to feeling completely isolated and vulnerable. My closest allies had abandoned me. My evidence seemed less compelling without their corroborating testimony, and my father was actively working to undermine my credibility. That Wednesday evening, I sat alone in my apartment reviewing the federal complaint documents that Sarah had filed on my behalf. The investigation was still proceeding, but without my internal allies, the case would be much harder to prove. Corporate fraud cases required insider testimony and detailed knowledge of business operations that would be difficult to obtain from outside sources. For the first time since discovering my father's betrayal, I began to doubt whether justice was possible. Richard had demonstrated that he was willing to use any means necessary to protect himself, including exploiting the financial vulnerabilities of his own employees. He had turned my most trusted allies against me and was systematically dismantling my credibility within the company. But as I sat there feeling defeated, I realized something important. The fact that my father had reacted so aggressively proved that my evidence was damaging enough to threaten him seriously. His desperate attempts to buy off my allies and discredit me showed that he was afraid of what I could prove. I might be alone, but I wasn't powerless, and the war was far from over. Thursday morning brought an unexpected lifeline that would ultimately prove to be the turning point in my battle against Richard. As I sat in my office trying to figure out how to proceed without my former allies, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Is this Serafina Sterling?" asked a crisp, professional voice I didn't recognize. "Yes, this is Serafina. Who am I speaking with?" "My name is Detective Rachel Morrison with the State Financial Crimes Unit. I understand you filed a complaint regarding embezzlement and fraud at Sterling Dynamics. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your evidence and the current status of our investigation." Detective Morrison explained that federal authorities had been investigating suspicious financial activities at several logistics companies in our region for the past 6 months. Sterling Dynamics had appeared on their radar due to unusual banking patterns and interstate money transfers that suggested organized fraud schemes. "Your complaint provided crucial pieces of a puzzle we've been trying to solve," Detective Morrison continued. "We'd like to meet with you today if possible, and we have some information that might interest you regarding your father's activities." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop 20 minutes away from the office in a location where we wouldn't be recognized by Sterling Dynamics employees. When Detective Morrison arrived, she was accompanied by Agent David Park from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's White Collar Crime Division. "Ms. Sterling, we appreciate your cooperation in this matter," Agent Park began. Your evidence has been extremely valuable, but we need you to know that this investigation extends far beyond your father's activities at Sterling Dynamics. Duh. They spread a series of photographs across our corner table showing documents and bank records that looked similar to what I had discovered in Richard's desk. Your father is part of a larger network of business owners who have been manipulating sales-hiding assets and defrauding employees across multiple companies. The scheme involves at least 12 businesses and has resulted in over $30 million in stolen funds. Detective Morrison pulled out a thick folder containing financial record surveillance photographs and correspondence between various business owners. Richard Sterling is not just embezzling from his own company. He's been coordinating with other business owners to share strategies for asset-hiding employee exploitation and fraudulent sales practices. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. My father was part of an organized network that met regularly to discuss methods for maximizing profits while minimizing legal risks. They shared information about compliant lawyers' offshore banking procedures and techniques for manipulating employees into working for below-market wages. One of the other business owners in this network has been cooperating with our investigation for the past 3 months, Agent Park explained. He provided detailed information about the network's operations, including recordings of meetings where your father discussed his plans for Sterling Dynamics. They played an audio recording that made my hands shake with rage. Richard's voice was clearly audible, discussing his strategy for managing my demands for fair compensation and recognition. The key is making them think they're lucky to have the opportunity, Richard said in the recording. My daughter actually believes she's going to inherit the business someday. Meanwhile, I'm setting up the sale and preparing to eliminate her position entirely. She's done excellent work improving operations, which makes the company more valuable to buyers, but she's becoming too demanding about money and recognition. Another voice on the recording, which Agent Park identified as Thomas Bradley, owner of Bradley Construction, responded with advice that chilled me to the bone. Family members can be the biggest threats because they have access to everything and they think they deserve special treatment. The best strategy is to keep them dependent on you financially while planning your exit strategy. Once you're ready to move, you can cut them loose completely. The recording continued with Richard describing his document falsification methods, his offshore account structures, and his timeline for completing the sale to Blackstone Freight. Everything I had discovered in his desk was confirmed by his own words, creating an indisputable record of premeditated fraud. We have over 40 hours of similar recordings, Detective Morrison explained. This network has been operating for at least 5 years, and your father has been one of the most active participants in developing and sharing fraudulent strategies. But the most significant revelation came when Agent Park showed me financial records from the other network members. Your father hasn't just been stealing from Sterling Dynamics. He's been receiving payments from other network members for consulting services, essentially selling his expertise in employee manipulation and asset hiding to other business owners. The additional income from these consulting arrangements exceeded $500,000 over the past 2 years. Richard had been profiting not just from his own criminal activities, but from teaching other people how to defraud their employees and business partners. This is where we need your continued cooperation, Detective Morrison said. We're planning to arrest all network members simultaneously next week, but we need someone inside Sterling Dynamics to help us gather final pieces of evidence and ensure that your father doesn't destroy records before we can execute search warrants. They outlined a plan that would require me to continue working normally while wearing a recording device during conversations with Richard. The goal was to capture him discussing the network's activities or making statements that would confirm his criminal intent. I understand this puts you at personal risk, Agent Park acknowledged. Your father has already demonstrated that he's willing to retaliate against people who threaten his operations, but your cooperation could be the difference between successful prosecutions and letting these criminals escape justice. The decision was easier than I expected. After watching my father systematically betray my trust, exploit my labor, and corrupt my closest colleagues, the opportunity to gather definitive evidence against him felt like a moral obligation. "I'll do whatever you need," I told them, "but I want to make sure that when this is over, all the employees at Sterling Dynamics are protected and that the company can continue operating without his corruption." Detective Morrison smiled for the first time during our meeting. "That's exactly what we're hoping to achieve. This network has victimized hundreds of employees across multiple companies. Your evidence and cooperation will help us not just prosecute your father, but dismantle an entire criminal organization." They provided me with a sophisticated recording device that looked like a normal pen and coached me on techniques for steering conversations toward incriminating topics. The plan was for me to have several recorded conversations with Richard over the next few days, gathering evidence about the network's operations and his specific criminal activities. As I drove back to Sterling Dynamics, I felt a sense of purpose and empowerment that I hadn't experienced since discovering my father's betrayal. I was no longer fighting alone against a manipulative family member. I was working with federal law enforcement to expose an organized criminal conspiracy that had victimized countless innocent people. The daughter Richard had dismissed as lucky to have this job was about to become the key witness in the biggest white-collar crime prosecution in our state's recent history. Justice was finally within reach, and this time my father wouldn't be able to buy his way out of the consequences. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a military operation. At exactly 8:30 a.m., as Richard sat in his office reviewing sale documents with his lawyer, federal agents executed simultaneous search warrants at Sterling Dynamics and 11 other businesses across 3 states. The coordinated arrests dismantled the entire fraud network in a single devastating sweep. I watched from my office window as agents in FBI jackets carried boxes of evidence from the building, including the contents of my father's locked desk drawer and every computer hard drive in the accounting department. Richard emerged in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and disbelief as news cameras captured his perp walk for the evening broadcasts. The recordings I had gathered during our final conversations proved to be the prosecution's most damaging evidence. In one particularly incriminating exchange, Richard had bragged about manipulating my loyalty while planning to steal my inheritance, describing his strategy as the perfect long-term con. The beauty of using family members, he had said, unaware that every word was being recorded, is that they work harder than regular employees because they think they have a stake in the business. Meanwhile, you can pay them below market rates, and they'll actually thank you for the opportunity. The investigation revealed that Richard's crimes extended far beyond what I had initially discovered. The total amount stolen from Sterling Dynamics alone exceeded $4 million when accounting for the consulting payments, falsified vendor invoices, hidden asset transfers, and skimmed profits. Across the entire network, the criminal conspiracy had defrauded employees and business partners of over $32 million. But the financial crimes were only part of the story. The psychological manipulation and systematic exploitation of family trust represented a level of betrayal that shocked even experienced federal prosecutors. During his sentencing hearing, the judge described Richard's actions as a profound violation of the most basic human relationships that form the foundation of business and family trust. Richard ultimately received a 15-year federal prison sentence with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. The court ordered complete restitution of stolen funds, forfeiture of all hidden assets, and permanent disqualification from serving in any corporate leadership position. His carefully constructed empire collapsed entirely, leaving him with nothing except the consequences of his choices. The sale to Blackstone Freight was immediately canceled when the buyer discovered the scope of the criminal investigation. However, the federal government's asset recovery process ensured that Sterling Dynamics could continue operating under new ownership structure that protected employee interests and maintained operational continuity. In an unexpected turn of events, the court appointed me as interim CEO during the company's reorganization. Recognizing my role as the whistleblower who had exposed the fraud and my proven ability to manage daily operations, the transition allowed me to implement the employee profit-sharing program and fair compensation structure that Richard had always refused to consider. Marcus, Patricia, and Janet all faced consequences for their roles in the cover-up, but the court recognized that they had been victims of manipulation rather than willing participants in the criminal conspiracy. Marcus lost his position at Sterling Dynamics but avoided criminal prosecution after providing testimony about Richard's intimidation tactics. Patricia's transfer to Phoenix was canceled, and she eventually found a better position with one of our former clients who appreciated her ethical standards. Janet's retirement proceeded as planned, but with a pension supplemented by her share of the restitution funds. The most unexpected positive outcome was the relationship I developed with Detective Morrison, who became a mentor and eventually a close friend as the case proceeded through the court system. Rachel had grown up in a similar situation with a manipulative parent and understood the complex emotions involved in choosing justice over family loyalty. "You did something incredibly brave," Rachel told me during one of our post-trial conversations. "Family betrayal is the hardest crime to report because it forces you to choose between personal relationships and moral principles. You chose correctly, and your courage protected hundreds of other potential victims." Through Rachel, I met a community of other whistleblowers and fraud survivors who had faced similar challenges in exposing family-based criminal enterprises. This chosen family of ethical professionals became more supportive and trustworthy than my biological family had ever been. The success of the Sterling Dynamics reorganization attracted attention from business schools and ethics organizations, leading to speaking opportunities where I could share my story and encourage other people to report corporate fraud. The experience taught me that sometimes the family you choose is more reliable than the family you inherit. 2 years after Richard's arrest, Sterling Dynamics was thriving under employee-owned management structure that prioritized transparency, fair compensation, and ethical business practices. Our client relationships were stronger than ever. Our employee satisfaction scores exceeded industry standards, and our profit-sharing program had created genuine financial security for everyone in the company. The most satisfying moment came when I received a letter from Thomas Bradley, the construction company owner who had been recorded giving Richard advice about manipulating family members. Thomas was serving his own prison sentence, but had taken responsibility for his actions and was working to make restitution to his victims. "Your courage to expose this network saved my children from discovering the same betrayal you experienced," Thomas wrote. "I hope someday I can earn their forgiveness the way you earned your freedom from a toxic situation." Richard has never apologized or taken responsibility for his actions. From prison, he continues to maintain that he was providing valuable business experience and that I was ungrateful for opportunities most people would appreciate. His inability to acknowledge the harm he caused confirmed that I had made the right choice in exposing his crimes. As I reflect on this journey from discovery to justice, I realize that my father's dismissive comment about being lucky to have this job was accidentally prophetic. I was incredibly lucky to have discovered his crimes before he could complete his plan, lucky to have found allies in law enforcement who took my evidence seriously, and lucky to have learned the difference between genuine family loyalty and manipulative exploitation. The experience taught me that true family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, not enabling harmful behavior. When someone you love is committing crimes that hurt innocent people, the most loving thing you can do is hold them accountable for their actions. Today, Sterling Dynamics employs over 200 people in jobs that provide genuine financial security and growth opportunities. Our success story has inspired other employee-owned businesses and demonstrated that ethical leadership creates sustainable prosperity for everyone involved. So, what do you think about family karma and justice being served? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing the right thing? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories about standing up for justice even when it costs everything. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes family betrayal can lead to finding your real family among people who share your values. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that choosing integrity over convenience always leads to better outcomes, even when the path feels impossible. Your courage to do the right thing can change not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you.